This lecture recording is for week 6 of Career and Employment Resources. In this lecture, we will be focused on looking at some specialized resources that fit with specific client needs, compiling and categorizing information, and also staying up to date. So far in the course, we have looked at the 4 stages of the career life planning model: who am I, what's out there, and how do I get there, as well as the 4th stage or component of the model on evaluating, reviewing, and adjusting plans as needed. We've also looked at resources that fit with specific stages and universal resources that fit with all of the stages. And we have looked at the ABCD model for evaluating resources, as well as a decision-making strategy. And last week, I also introduced to you the 3 golden rules of information management. So in the lecture this week, we need to start with the idea that it is important to find resources that are general and apply to most, if not all, clients. And most of the resources that we have looked at so far would have pretty general application and could be used with most clients in the field. But sometimes clients will have specialized needs, and that means that they require specialized resources to supplement the more general resources that you might recommend. So although we would like to have some resources that are one size fits all, we also want to ensure that we are offering clients resources that fit with their particular needs, issues, and challenges. So some examples of specialized needs, and this is by no means a complete list, but it does cover a great many of the types of needs you might encounter working in the field. So working, first of all, with youth, and this could be considered to be pretty much anybody under the age of 20, and perhaps even in early 20s. Some people have special needs related to their life stage. So for example, maybe you have someone who is coming back into the labor market after having been off for a while, having had some kids and staying at home for a few years to raise their children, and now they want to get back into the labor market, but they want to only look at jobs, for example, that might allow them to work from home or might allow them to work only part-time, that might not require a lot of travel. So those types of specialized needs. We also will definitely be working with clients with a broad range of different types of disabilities and challenges. They could be visible disabilities or invisible disabilities. So we need to have some specialized resources to support those clients when they're in the process of job search or changing careers. We also will likely be working with newcomers, with people who are newly arrived in Canada. And some of you listening to this lecture may in fact yourself have been in that specialized group, or perhaps you are still in that group. So it's important to have resources to support people who are new to Canada and may not understand the Canadian culture in terms of work search and workplaces and so on, or may have other special needs, such as needing to have their credentials evaluated. So those are some of the challenges that might be encountered for newcomers. And then, of course, we could have mature workers. This would perhaps be anybody over, let's say, the age of 40, 45. The kinds of resources that you would share with them might be a little different, let's say, than the resources you might share with clients who are youth. So you could have, again, someone who's been out of the labor market for a while, perhaps due to illness or injury as a mature worker, or perhaps they've become injured and they can't continue to do their work. Or you could even have someone who is perhaps close to retirement age, but not quite ready to retire. Maybe they've chosen to step away from full-time work, or they're being downsized out of their job. So we want to be able to provide them with some good resources to help them determine what kind of work they would like to do. On the right-hand side of the page, we can see some additional clients with specialized needs. So First Nations communities, this group can have very specialized needs and a slightly different approach to working with them in terms of work search and career change. So for example, providing them certain clients who are in the First Nations group with a lot of written documentation to read may not work as well for them as sitting with them and having them talk with you and use a narrative approach and tell you stories. So that's not to stereotype that all clients from First Nations communities would prefer that kind of approach, but there is a strong emphasis in that in many of the First Nations communities on oral culture and oral communication and transmission of stories. So that might be an approach that you might need to take, or tools that you select should have some application to First Nations clients if you're working with them. Also, LGBTQ clients, and if I think you probably are familiar with that acronym by now, but if not, it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer or questioning. And sometimes we have a two added on to that to reflect First Nations, two-spirited individuals. So again, you want to ensure that any resources that you are sharing with your clients, that they can look at those resources and feel that they see themselves reflected in those resources. Issues related to mental health. So this can connect to the idea of working with clients with disabilities. Quite often mental health issues are they're invisible. So clients are going to have big challenges trying to decide, what should I disclose, if anything, in interviews, as one example. So again, you want to have resources that might fit for those clients. Clients with socioeconomic status issues, and this is closely tied to homelessness, but you may have a client who technically is not fully homeless. Perhaps they are living with family members, but maybe they have to couch surf sometimes and they can't stay in the one place that they're in all the time. Or they are trying to get back into the labor market or get into school and they don't have enough money to do so. So those are some just examples of things that might relate to socioeconomic status. And then of course homelessness, trying to look for work when you have no fixed address, no way to, shower yourself and dress in nice clothes to go on an interview. So you want to also have resources to fit to work with those clients as well. And there may be other specialized needs you can think of beyond this list. And so it's important to be prepared at any time to have clients from any one of these demographic groups to come in for counseling. It's really important that you not look at this list and think, oh, well, I'm going to, wherever I work, I'm not going to work with people with mental health issues, or I'm not going to work with people who are LGBTQ. I can promise you that whatever you see on this list and beyond, you are going to be working with those types of clients. When you are out in this field, I'm sure many of you already realize the vast diversity of clients that you're going to be working with. So you need to be prepared at any time that a client from any one of these demographic groups could show up for assistance and counseling. And you may, perhaps feel that it's a bit outside of your area of expertise, and that it might be better to refer your client elsewhere, which is fine. But in the moment when that client is there with you in your office or in your workplace and is sitting in front of you looking for assistance, the one thing we don't want to do in that moment is to say, oh, I can't work with you, I'm going to refer you somewhere else, and then send them away. So you want to always be able to, unless it's mandated through your organization that you can't work with the client, you need to be prepared in that moment to use your common assessment process or use some process for deciding where are they at in the career life planning model. And as we talked about in the three golden rules several weeks ago, that you would never send a client away with no information and no way to get additional help. And you want to avoid a scenario where you just say to them, oh, here's a good website, or here's somebody else you can talk to that will be of more help to you than I am. Have a nice day. So you really want to make sure that you're still working with your clients in a way that helps them feel like they have a chance to tell their story, to express themselves, to get some support on an emotional level if they need it, and so on. Another thing to keep in mind is that you are going to have clients who have intersections of these issues. So you may have a youth who is also LGBTQ. You may have someone from a First Nations community who has a disability. So as we get more of these types of issues intersecting, it can certainly be a big challenge. Wherever you end up working, you will most likely find that there are certain types of clients that come in based on the community that you're serving, and you may then get to know the key issues facing those clients and get to know specific resources that you know are good for those clients. So you may work with a population with the same specialized need in your workplace. So you may be working in an agency that is specifically for people with disabilities or specifically for newcomers. And if you're doing that, then you would compile and use specialized resources for that population. As I just said, you would get to know what the needs of those particular clients would be, and you would have resources at hand to recommend for those clients. But you may also work with a broad and diverse client group, and so you would need to have a list that includes some good specialized resources. And I'm going to show you a few today. It's certainly not a completely comprehensive list. It's just giving you some examples of resources that you might be able to use and offer clients in that group. So I'm not going to go to these websites. I'm going to ask you to go and have a look at each of them. For youth, here are just 4 examples. The Youth Employment Services has been around a very long time, and it is a very, very good service and agency. So I do recommend that you have a look at the resources they have online. We've already looked at the Alberta Learning Information Service website, which is excellent. Government of Canada also has some specific links on its page for youth. It has links for other types of groups, but also for youth. And then also Youth Jobs Canada. So those are 4 that you could, in fact, recommend for youth that you could be reasonably confident would be good resources. For mature clients, it was interesting when I first went to try and find some good websites for mature clients. I would fall into this demographic group if I were looking for work. And some of the websites that I found, I didn't feel were particularly helpful. And I thought some of them kind of talked down a little bit to this particular demographic. So these are 3 that I found that I thought were quite good. And again, I encourage you to go and look at each of these, explore what's on there, the information that clients can get, and to see if you can find so many other good resources, good websites, or other tools that you might recommend. For First Nations clients, there are actually quite a few very, very good websites out there. Here are 4 that I found, and you will note again that Alberta is on this list. So the Alberta website does a good job of providing good generic resources and universal resources, and then it also has some specific segments for specific client groups like First Nations. So please do go and look at all of these websites as well and get to know what's on them. And then for LGBTQ clients, here are 3 that are very good. In particular, 519 is an actual physical agency that's available in Toronto, and it's excellent and has been around for a really long time and has very good credibility. And then I found 2 other very good online sites that I thought were quite good. So that's just 4 out of the list that we looked at of specific clients with specialized needs. What I'm going to ask you to do is to go back to this list and find at least 1 resource for each of the other groups. For example, people with disabilities, for newcomers, for people with mental health issues. So I encourage you to do some exploration in addition to looking at those websites, to also find resources online for the other groups that are not represented in the lists that I've just given you. I'm going to pause here and finish off this part of the video, and then when you have a bit of time and you've taken a break, please come back and watch part 2 of this video.